Okay, we will start. So those who are watching this video, we are taking this class in our routine ICU environment, so there can be disturbances between, so please bear with that. Now this lecture will cover arterial blood gases as an investigation. It's a very important investigation from ICU point of view. Every patient, more than 95% of the patients who are admitted in the ICU have ABG once or twice, or at least once in their ICU admission tenure. Now, the first session which we are taking today is how to read an ABG. Reading an ABG means what is there, what is the oxygen status, how is the ventilation going on, what is the acid-base status that is going on. In the second session, we will discuss interpretation of ABG in relation to the clinical scenario. In today, we will understand that this blood gas is having metabolic acidosis. In next session, which will come up, and we will discuss why this metabolic acidosis is happening in this patient, how we can apply, how can we narrow down the diagnosis, also what management and treatment part we should change by looking at the ABG. This will cover in the second class, which will take later on. First thing which you should think of when you have advised an ABG, first step is that other than identification and all those things, why you are advising a blood gas to a particular patient, what you are expecting. Is my patient is having respiratory acidosis, I am looking for a raised PCO2 level, or I am expecting a metabolic acidosis in this patient, or a alkalosis in this patient. First thing you should before ordering an ABG, you should understand, you should think why I am ordering in this ABG in this patient, what could I get in this particular case scenario. Now, most of the students who come to ICU newly joined just look straight away jump to acid base, means what is the pH and all those things. This is not the way. There is a proper structure to read an ABG. You should practice that so that you will not miss anything in your day-to-day practice, because ICU is a very hectic environment. So those who are listening, don't worry about what I am writing here. It may not be visible because of the camera distance, but what we are discussing, everything is covered, and you can always discuss this on our forums. Link is given in the section. So the first thing you should look in ABG is PO2, oxygen status of the patient. So the first thing we should look for PO2. What is the oxygen status? The routine oxygen PO2 is 80 to 100. This is the routine oxygenation in blood gas. If your patient has PO2 of 80 to 100, that means it's normal oxemia. Oxemia means in blood oxygen. If it is between 60 to 80, then mild hypoxemia. Mild hypoxemia. If it is 40 to 60 or 59, it is moderate hypoxemia, and if it is less than 40, it is severe hypoxemia. Clear? Very simple. Just look at blood gas, and if you find PO2 is 62, this patient is having mild hypoxia or hypoxemia. If the PO2 is 32, then it is severe hypoxemia. This thing, if patient is not able to maintain good oxygen status in the body, whatever the acid-base status, he will die or he will deteriorate. So oxygen is the primary requirement which should be there in adequate amounts in the body. So the first thing you should look is PO2 level. Now, what if more than 100? It is hyperoxemia. Hyperoxemia. This may not be very much of concern in adult patient, but in kids, in infants, in newborns, the blood-brain barrier is not so much developed. So high amount of oxygen can cross to the brain and cause free radical injury. So in children's, in neonates, in infants, you should always look whether this patient is having hypoxemia or not. Some patients come from the OT or some in the PICU or NICU on ventilator, and if you find PO2 200, 250, then it can damage the brain. So that's why oxygen level should be maintained around 100 as a dictum. In adults, it doesn't do that much damage, but yes, you should target that. Now, second thing which is more important, you have looked, first thing you have identified whether this patient is having mild, moderate, severe hypoxemia. But this PO2 level is being maintained on how much amount of oxygen? Suppose I am at the room air and my PO2 is 90. Another patient who is on 100% FiO2 and his PO2 is 95. Which is more severe?
100%.
100%. So, because the amount of oxygen required to maintain that PO2 level also matters. In fact, it matters a lot. So, at that particular FiO2, how much the PO2 level should be in the blood? We are at 21%. So, in our blood, if we taken a sample, PO2 will be 100. It is nearly 5 times. Nearly 5 times. So, if the FiO2 is 20%, your PO2 level should be 100. So, approximately 5 times. Simple formula. So, if you are giving 40% FiO2, how much should be the PO2 in the blood? 40 into 5, 200. If I am giving 100% FiO2 on ventilator, it should be 500. This is the formula. This is the general rule. The amount of FiO2 you are giving, 5 times the PO2 should be in the blood. Correct? Got it? Now, on ventilator, this is very easy. If when you are giving 20% FiO2 or 40% or 50% or 60%, what if the patient is on oxygen? Room means it is 2 liter per minute, 4 liter per minute or 6 liter per minute oxygen on BiPAP. How will you calculate that? So, if we are on 21%, so we can calculate, we will consider at 20. Suppose the patient is on 1 liter oxygen at 4, it will be 24% FiO2. If patient is on 2, then 28. Patient on 3 liter oxygen per minute, it will be 32. Patient on 4 liter oxygen per minute, it will be 36. If 5, 40, 6, 44, 7, 48, 8 liter, 52. Above 8, if you increase by 9, 10, it's disproportionate. You may not be able to increase the FiO2 much. That's why at certain point of time, you need to ventilate the patient. Up to 6 liter, up to 5 liter, actually you can give the oxygen by nasal cannula. Above 6, you need to use face mask. Otherwise, it can damage the nasal mucosa. Got it? So, this way you convert the amount of oxygen given in liter per minute into FiO2. And from FiO2, calculate how much the PO2 is expected in that ABG report. Got this point?
Yes.
Understand. You have a patient, you are giving 4-5 liters of oxygen or 50% FiO2 to that particular patient. But PO2 level in the blood is 100. You are requiring 50% of oxygenation, your PO2 is. So, why this PO2 level, FiO2 is required? Is there a problem in the lung or there is some other etiology? How will you differentiate that? Whether lungs are normal or lungs are abnormal. You are giving the FiO2, but in blood it is not reaching there. So, where is the problem? Either the lungs are abnormal or lungs are normal. How can you differentiate? You need to calculate in that alveolar arterial gradient. This is your airway, this is your alveoli, and this is the blood vessel which is crossing by. Now this alveoli, this is A, denoted by here A. This oxygen is coming. Now it's diffusing into your vessel, blood vessel. It is PO2. Okay? Small a. So we need to calculate alveolar arterial gradient. Means the difference between the PO2 in the alveoli and in the blood vessel. Is there a difference too much high? If there is difference is too much high, means diffusion is not taking place at this level. That means lungs are definitely abnormal. If it is normal, that means the problem is somewhere else. Either the patient is not getting proper ventilated, or central cause, or other causes can be there. So how you calculate this? Formula is 713 into FiO2, okay, minus 1.25 into PCO2. This will give your alveolar oxygen. 713 into FiO2 minus 1.25 into PCO2. This will give your alveolar oxygenation. Now from this you measure the PO2 level in the blood, which is given here your ABG report. This will tell you what is the gradient. If it is less than 15 on room air, that means lungs are normal. If it is more than, means something is bad in the lung, something is happening in the lung, there is a problem in the lung, lungs are the culprit. If on 100% FiO2, this gradient is around 50. So your range is actually 15 to 50. If your alveolar arterial gradient is somewhere between 15 to 50, so between 15 to 50, that means lungs are quite okay. Lungs are not so bad. So alveolar arterial gradient denotes whether your diffusion across the alveoli to the arteries of the lung are normal or abnormal. So if it is between 15 to 50, ranging from 21% FiO2 to 100% FiO2, means lungs are quite okay. If they are more, that means there is definite pathology in the lung. Got it? Got your point?
Yes.
So in the first thing we were seeing is PO2 level, whether the patient is having hypoxemia, how much amount of oxygen, mild, moderate, severe. Secondly, how much is the PF ratio, means how much FiO2 is required to maintain that. And third, if the diffusion is there, whether the lungs are normal or abnormal. One more thing you should see in PO2 is the clinical correlation. What is the respiratory rate? Suppose a patient is maintaining such PO2 of 90 with a respiratory rate of 18, and other patient is there which is maintaining PO2 of 95 with the respiratory rate of 35. So naturally the patient with a respiratory rate of 35 is more tachypneic, the work of breathing is doing more, so he is doing a lot of effort to maintain that PO2 of 95 by compensating with the respiratory rate. So always look what is the cost of breathing to maintain that PO2 level. So this completes your assessment of PO2. Got it? What is the actual oxemia level in the blood? How much is the amount of oxygen you are giving in terms of FiO2, in terms of oxygen per liter, whether the lungs are normal or abnormal, and what is the cost of breathing. This much you say. Here one thing I want to stress, what is the difference between your SpO2 and PO2 level? Okay, you are monitoring SpO2 levels regularly in the monitor, you call it saturation, and you are also measuring the ABG PO2 level. So what is the difference between, if we are seeing everything on the monitor SpO2 level, what is the need for calculating the PO2 level in the blood? So you use the term saturation word we are using. So oxygen travels in the blood vessel in two forms. One is your RBCs, in which hemoglobin is there, okay, and another one is the dissolved PO2. So one way oxygen travels by binding hemoglobin, and another form of oxygen travels getting dissolved in the plasma. So the pulse oximeter which you are measuring on the monitor is this saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. How much amount of hemoglobin is being saturated with oxygen, that is your pulse oximeter is showing. And this PO2 which you are measuring in the ABG is the dissolved oxygen which is there in the plasma. Got my point? Hemoglobin can carry 4 oxygen molecules. If it is 1 oxygen molecule is there, 25% saturated. 2 oxygen are there, then 50% saturated. 3 oxygen are there, 75% saturated. 4 oxygen molecules attached with hemoglobin, then 100% saturated. So it is the average of all the hemoglobin concentration which is being saturated with oxygen, that is being picked up by pulse oximeter. Got my point? This point is very clear.
Yes.
So in ABG we are seeing the dissolved plasma PO2, and in pulse oximeter we are seeing the oxygen which has saturated the hemoglobin. So why we need to measure two? We can work with any one of them. Now, what is the relation between two? Then here comes your sigmoid curve, oxygen dissociation curve. Oxidation dissociation curve, you have seen it is like a sigmoid, like this. Okay, till your saturation in means SpO2 is around 90, your PO2 in the blood will be definitely above 60%. If your saturation in the blood on monitor is above 90, your PO2 level in the blood will be above 60. But when your SpO2 level falls below 90, the PO2 level drastically falls in the blood. This has a steep fall. That's why it is required to maintain the SpO2 level above 90 in every patient who is in the ICU other than COPD patients. You need to maintain this much of saturation. If the SpO2 is less than 90%, there will be a drastic fall in the PO2 in the blood. That's why always try to keep SpO2 targets above 90. Even in ARDS we say SpO2 of 88% or PO2 of more than 52%. You should maintain in the blood. Got my point? Difference between SpO2 and PO2? Clear. Now, we have seen PO2. Second part which you should see is PCO2 level.
Sir, I have a question. Sir, you mentioned about the PF ratio. So how do we correlate that?
Okay. In routine practice, if you are very busy and you are not able to calculate alveolar arterial gradient on a regular basis, suppose ICU is very busy, patients are very sick, not getting the point. So what you can do is you calculate the PF ratio. PF ratio is PO2 in the ABG divided by FiO2. How much FiO2 the patient is receiving. So PO2 should be 100 for a patient who is on room air. So on room air, if it is 20%, we take it as 0.2. Okay. So it will be 500. Okay. So PF ratio should be 500 is normal. In routine practice, 450 to 500 is also normal. But when you read ARDS, when you read the definition of ARDS, there is a mention of PF ratio. If your PF ratio is less than 300, 200 to 300, then it is mild ARDS. If it is 200 to 100, then it is moderate ARDS, and if it is less than 100, it is severe ARDS. It doesn't mean that if you have a PF ratio of between 150, that means it is moderate severe ARDS. No, other things also come in the definition of ARDS: acute onset, bilateral fluffy shadow, normal cardiac function, or abnormal cardiac function. But this is non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema, and your PF ratio is less than this. So this classifies ARDS into mild, moderate, severe based on the PF ratio. Less than 100 severe ARDS, 100 to 200 moderate ARDS, 200 to 300 mild ARDS. Above 300 it comes out of the definition of ARDS. But PF ratio will give you an idea that there is some pathology in the body which is not allowing the oxygen which we are giving to pass on into the blood. Either it could be lung or it could be outside the lung. If it is, you need to find out whether the lung is involved or not. Then you have to calculate alveolar arterial gradient. So this will tell you whether the lungs are normal or lungs are abnormal. Got your point?
Yes.
Clear? PF ratio is nothing. PO2 about FiO2.
Yes.
Second thing. Second parameter you should see is PCO2 level. It is very simple. Normal PCO2 level is 35 to 45. Okay. Basically, what is PCO2 showing in your patient? You can put an oxygen mask and the PO2 levels increase. But for PCO2 level to be being in the normal range, a patient has to exhale properly. Inhale and exhale means actual ventilation which is taking place, oxygenation is going on and carbon dioxide is coming out. So until unless if a patient is not breathing properly, suppose he has got a shallow breathing, or in COPD patients or who has OSA, PCO2, if the lungs are not properly expanding, PCO2 level will tends to rise. Or if the patient is hyperventilating, that means PCO2 level will wash out. So PCO2 is actually denoting your ventilatory status, whether normal ventilation is going on or abnormal ventilation, abnormal whether hypoventilating or hyperventilating. So whenever the patient hyperventilates, what will happen? PCO2 will wash out. So your PCO2 will become less than 35. So this will be hyperventilating. If patient is not ventilating, shallow breathing, if the PCO2 tends to rise, that means it is not ventilating, so hypoventilate. So it is called hypercarbia, this is called hypocarbia.
Retention में जो बोला है, CO2 retention में ये होता है।
हाँ, CO retention means patient is retaining hypercarbia. Hypercarbia means hyper carbon dioxide, which is denotion of hypoventilation, and this is hypocarbia, which is denotion of hyperventilation. Got your point?
Yes.
One or two exceptions are there in that. In pregnancy, in third trimester, the abdomen gets distended, enlarged. So these females are little bit tends to hyperventilate. So their baseline PCO2 remains 30. So if you have a patient, third trimester lady, who has got a PCO2 of 40 or 45, that means it is something is abnormal. है ना? In cirrhotic, large cirrhotic patients who have distended abdomen, they also tends to be little bit hyperventilate. Obese patient, because of distension, they tend to hyperventilate fast, but because of their OSA, they need to compensate for carbon dioxide. So usually PCO2 level will be little bit high in that. Got my huge abdomen distended can present with slightly lower side PCO2. Now comes to the acid base status, for which many of you see any blood gas. Straight away jump to pH. This is acidosis, alkalosis. We are little bit short of time. We'll have only 35 minutes more. So we'll try to cover up in this. Any doubts you can ask. If we got time, you can ask here, or you can just switch on to forum or website for the same. You can ask in the comments also. Third thing which comes is pH, acid base balance. So before jumping to acid base status, basically lungs and kidneys, these are the two organs which are actually maintaining your acid base status. I am all explaining this to you to make you understand in a better way, in a simplified way. Lungs are dealing with carbon dioxide, which is an acid. Kidneys are dealing with the bicarb level, which is a base buffer. Okay? So lungs deal with carbon dioxide acid level, kidney deals with the base buffer level. Okay? And the major difference between these two is lung can compensate very fast. You can immediately hyperventilate, you can immediately shallow breathing, but kidneys take time to adjust. That's why we will see in respiratory it can be acute or chronic. In metabolic part there is no acute and chronic. Okay? Acute respiratory or chronic respiratory, lungs either decompensating in 24 hours or more than 24 hours. So this much you have understood, that acid part in the blood gas is PCO2 and the base part is bicarb HCO3. HCO3 is governed by your kidneys, PCO2 is governed by your lungs. See, and in both of them lungs adjust fast, kidney don't adjust fast. Thirdly, when they both move in the same direction, suppose your PCO2 level is rising and your bicarb level are also rising, there is single disorder present. If your PCO2 level is rising and your bicarb level is decreasing, both are in opposite direction, that means more than one disorder is present in the blood gas. This you should understand. Clear? Got your point?
Yes.
Now we'll understand when you call it acidosis, when you call it alkalosis. The normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45. This is the normal pH, and if we take in middle, 7.4 is the cutoff for advanced learners. Anything below 7.35 is acidemia. Anything more than 7.45 is alkalemia. है ना? Means less than 7.35 acidosis, more than 7.45 alkalosis. Now, once you see a blood gas, look at the pH first. After oxygenation and carbon dioxide, look at the pH. What is your blood gas showing? Whether it is in the normal range or whether it is abnormal range. If it is abnormal, you need to find out which component is causing this, whether the lungs are creating a problem or whether the kidneys metabolic part is creating the problem. So if lungs are creating the problem, it will be a primary respiratory disorder. If the kidneys are creating a problem or metabolic part is creating problem, it will be primary metabolic disorder. Though one good thing is, if the lung do something, kidney try to compensate. If the kidney do something, your lung try to compensate. Clear? So look at the pH, then you will find out. If pH is less than 7.35, so this is acidosis, acidemia. Now in acidemia, what should be the bicarb? Bicarb is a base, so base should decrease, bicarb should decrease. So in acidosis, bicarb should decrease. If with bicarb are decreased and pH is decreased, it is a primary metabolic disorder. Now if your PCO2 is an acid, so it should increase. It should increase. So if pH is less than 7.35, bicarb is decreasing, that means it's a primary metabolic disorder. If your PCO2 is increasing along with decrease in the pH, then it's a respiratory disorder because acid is increasing. Okay. We'll look for the compensation, but this is the way you calculate. If it is more than 7.45, alkalosis. So bicarb should, what happen to bicarb? Increase. Because bicarb is a base and bicarb should increase. So this will be alkalosis. If pH is greater than 7.45 and your PCO2 level should decrease because acid is the PCO2 is an acid and pH is alkalotic, so acid should decrease. So this way you calculate, way you classify. It's a metabolic acidosis or metabolic alkalosis, respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis. In metabolic acidosis, we will see which type of metabolic acidosis is there, whether it's a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, low, all this. In respiratory, we will see whether it's an acute respiratory acidosis or chronic respiratory acidosis. And alkalosis will look in metabolic alkalosis, whether it's chloride dependent or fluid responsive or not responsive. We'll look for that. So first, we'll cover up the largest part, metabolic acidosis. So in metabolic acid scenario, pH is less than 7.35 and your bicarb is decreasing. Normal bicarb range is 22 to 26. Normal bicarb is 22 to 26. So bicarb will always be less than 22. Average is 24. So bicarb decreasing, they will decrease less than 22. Now, when the metabolic acidosis is happening, how much the lung will compensate? You need to calculate that also. So very simple. Acidosis is a little bit tricky thing. It's not good thing, and it's one of the most fearing thing everybody looks for. So lung tends to overreact. They tend to adjust fast. So for every 1 bicarb drop, the PCO2 should decrease or increase. I have told you. If bicarb is decreasing, your carbon dioxide should also decrease. That only in that way they will be able to maintain the pH. Why lungs are adjusting? Because ultimately they have to maintain the pH of the blood. If the pH is not maintained, the milieu in the body disturbs and then tissue organ will be affected. So when bicarb is decreasing, why your PCO2 levels will decrease same direction? Because they want to maintain the pH. So how much the lung will adjust? For 1 drop in the bicarb, there will be 1 to 1.5 decrease in the PCO2 level. It's a range. There are many formula available. but this is what I have learned from my teachers, and it works every time. So every 1 drop in the bicarb decreases PCO2 by 1 to 1.5. Suppose your bicarb is 14. There is a pH less than 7.35. Your bicarb is 14. So how much is the drop? We'll take average 24. 24 minus 14, 10. Means by 10 bicarb has decreased. Okay? So how much PCO2 should drop? 10 into 1 and 10 into 1.5.
10 to 15.
10 to 15 means, if what is the average PCO2? 40. So 40 minus 10, 40 minus 15. So 30 to 25. Till now the PCO2 should drop by 25 to 30, means the level should be somewhere this, only then your pH will be maintained. So this is the way your PCO2 levels are adjusted by the lung for every single drop in the bicarb. This is clear with the compensation?
Yes.
One thing is there, if you have a primary disorder and the second part has compensated for that disorder, don't mention in the blood gas compensated, it creates confusion. If metabolic acidosis is there and your lung has adjusted correctly, adequately, and your pH is maintained, so you will not write metabolic acidosis with compensated respiratory alkalosis. You will only write primary metabolic acidosis. No need to write compensation. It creates a confusion. Now some other person will work on respiratory alkalosis also. No, it's an adjustment part. Nothing we have to do for that. Now this metabolic acidosis is divided into high anion gap metabolic acidosis, normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, low anion gap metabolic acidosis, or negative anion gap metabolic acidosis. We are not going to discuss detail about the causes in today's class. This will be taken up in second class, where we will see how to interpret an ABG in a clinical scenario. Today we will just read whether in this ABG there is a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, whether is high anion gap metabolic acidosis, normal anion gap, low or negative. This much we will see. Why we are differentiating into different groups? There should be some reason. Anything in the medical science, if it is classifying into certain things, either diagnostic parameters are different, or either treatment part is different, or the management part is different. Otherwise there is no need of classification. So you need to understand this, that in your normal person, anions and cations are always equal. There is no anion gap actually in our body. There is no anion gap. It's just because our labs can measure certain ions and cannot measure certain cations. That's why the difference between the number of anions and number of cations, there is a gap which is called an anion gap, unmeasured anion. Suppose this is your body filled with certain positive ions and certain negative ions. Now if we break into this, we break this, these are positive ions and these are negative ions. Both are equal. Lab can measure all the anions, positive ions, but lab cannot measure this much area. They can only measure this. Chloride is there, bicarb are there. They can measure this, and sodium, potassium, all these things measure. Here you have sulfates and other negative ions which the lab doesn't measure normally. So there is a natural unmeasured gap which exists in the body in terms of laboratory, not in the human body. So that is called your normal anion gap. This much anion gap is present in your body. We accept that we are not able to measure these ions, and this is called a natural anion gap, and this is around 12. This is around 12. So if the anion gap is around 12, when we'll calculate, if the anion gap is 12, that means okay, fine, it is a normal anion gap. But suppose if the anion gap is increasing, means we are not able to measure this much thing. Laboratory is not able to measure, means something has extra come in the body, either produced in the body or patient has taken from somewhere else, which is unmeasured. It could be lactic acidosis, it could be a poisoning, it could be ketoacidosis. So these are extra anions which have come in, charges which have come inside the body. Therefore, your treatment parts differ. So this will be called high anion gap metabolic acidosis. How will differentiate? In normal anion gap, there is nothing from the outside. Something happening in the body. There is a difference in the balance between chloride and bicarb. Okay. Normal anion gap, how we will calculate? Normal anion gap you calculate by sodium minus chloride plus SiO3. This is how you calculate your anion gap. Metabolic acidosis there, sodium minus chloride plus bicarb. You calculated the anion gap, correct? Now, if your anion gap is normal, means in the normal range, 12. If 12 is the normal anion gap, which usually we read in the textbooks. If you compare with this, if your anion gap is coming in plus minus 2 range of this, usually you call it normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. But here's a catch. This concept again you need to understand. Whenever you are telling it is an high anion gap metabolic acidosis or normal or low or negative, you are comparing the anion gap in the ABG report with a certain expected range. If the difference is too high, then you can call a high anion. If the difference is small in the range, it is called normal. If the difference is low, then you can low. And if it is negative anion gap, then it is a negative anion gap metabolic acidosis. Clear? So for comparison, you need to know what is the expected in this patient. Suppose I tell this patient is expected to have an anion gap of 20 and my anion gap is 10. So it is low. I was expecting 20, it is low. Suppose I say anion gap expected in this patient is 10, but when the ABG comes, anion gap is 24. So it's a high anion gap metabolic acidosis. So first thing you need to understand how to calculate the expected anion gap. So expected anion gap formula is very simple. Anion gap normal, which is there in the body, 12. These are changing because we work in a critical environment, so patient physiology changes. Plus anion gap is normally 12. Secondly, your pH correction plus albumin correction. So albumin correction, if your normal albumins are 4, okay, total protein are 6 and normal albumin value is 4. If your albumin drops by 1, your anion gap decreases by 2, double the amount. Clear? This is the normal. 12 is the anion gap standard which is present in everyone, but patient is hyperproteinemic and its albumin is 2. So expected anion gap will be 2 into 4, double of 2 means 2. There is 2 drop in the albumin, so anion gap will drop by 4. So the expected anion gap will be 8. 12 minus 4, 8. This will be the expected anion gap. And pH correction. pH correction is simple. If your ABG pH is less than 7.35, minus 2. If it is more than 7.45, plus 4. I know those who are listening, it will be a tough thing for them to remember all those things, but you can go around this video again and again. You can ask the questions on the forum. We'll clarify everything. If you have a specific question, you can ask in the comment section. We'll do a different short session on that also. All the comments which came for ABG. So pH correction. Expected anion gap is anion gap plus pH correction plus albumin correction. So pH correction is if acidotic less than 7.35, minus 2. If more than 7.45, plus 4. So suppose albumin is normal. My patient pH is 7.2. So what will be expected anion gap? Normal is 12. pH is 7.35. So minus 2, 10. So my patient expected anion gap is 10. Now I'll look in the ABG, what is the anion gap, and we'll compare with that, and then we'll come to conclusion it is a high anion gap or normal anion gap. Got this formula? Expected anion gap is anion gap plus pH correction plus albumin correction. Suppose your patient's pH is 7.2 and albumin is 3. So normal anion gap is 12 minus pH correction means minus 2, pH is less than 7.2, albumin is 1, so anion gap will drop by 2. So minus 2 minus 2, that means again 8. 8 will be the expected anion gap. Okay. So now to classify which disorder you are having, you need to have delta anion gap, which is, what is the anion gap? Is actual anion gap in your blood minus expected. Okay. Suppose in your blood gas, this I'll again explain. Suppose in your blood gas your anion gap is 20 and your expected is 10, so it will be high anion gap metabolic acidosis. When you, this is very clear, if it is what we are expecting the anion gap and if the level is plus 2, then it will be called high anion gap. I am expecting a 14 anion gap in my patient, and if the anion gap comes 18, then it is a high anion gap metabolic acidosis. Again I am saying what you are expecting plus 2, okay, not plus minus 2, plus 2. If your anion gap expected is some x and your what is actual in there is plus 2, more than plus 2, then it is a high anion gap metabolic. Now what should be the normal anion gap? It is within this plus 2 range and 50% of what is expected. If it is in this range, then it is a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Again, if my expected is 12, so if it is the anion gap is between plus 2 range means up to 14 or 12 is expected, so 6. If it is from 6 to 14, then it will be a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Again I am explaining. For high anion gap, plus 2 should be the figure for high anion gap metabolic acidosis. Suppose it is 12, which I am expecting, and my ABG anion gap is 18, then it is high anion gap metabolic acidosis. But if my ABG anion gap is 13 or 7, it will come in normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, means plus 2 and 50% of what is expected. Suppose my expected anion gap is 10, so plus 2 is 12 and half of 10 is 50%, 5. So 5 to 12. If the anion gap in the ABG is between 5 to 12, then it will be a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Clear? This is normal anion gap. High plus 2, more than plus 2, normal plus 2, and lower limit is 50% of expected. If it is lower than 50% of expected, then it will become as a low anion gap metabolic acidosis. And if the figure is negative, then it's a anion gap metabolic acidosis. You got the point?
Yes.
This is how we classify. Why we are classifying all this? Because the causes differ and the management differs in different anion gap metabolic acidosis. Okay? The first thing you have done after seeing a pH, you got this bicarb are low. This patient is having metabolic acidosis, so I need to calculate the anion gap. You have calculated the expected anion gap in this patient, then you have deducted the what is there in the anion gap. You have compared and now you have divided. My patient is having high anion gap metabolic acidosis, normal, low or negative. You got the steps clear?
Yes.
Or should I repeat again? Got it? Now, only in high anion gap, HAGMA, we call it high anion gap metabolic acidosis is HAGMA, है ना? Normal anion gap metabolic acidosis is NAGMA. Only in high anion gap metabolic acidosis, you need to see whether some other disorder is also present or not. Other metabolic disorder is present or not. Compensation you have seen from the respiratory part. But in high anion gap metabolic acidosis, whether normal anion gap is also present or metabolic alkalosis is also present. So for that you need to calculate corrected bicarb. Corrected bicarb. Corrected bicarb. Okay. This you should look only in high anion gap metabolic acidosis, HAGMA. And it is very simple. It is very simple. The difference between your expected and actual anion gap, that is delta anion gap, already you must know. Suppose my expected is 10 actual is 20, so difference is 10. So that difference in the anion gap plus the actual bicarb in the blood gas, that is your corrected bicarb. Got? Suppose your delta anion gap. Delta anion gap is what is the difference between your expected and blood gas actual anion gap. That difference plus SCO3 in the ABG. This is your corrected bicarb. Normal bicarb is 22 to 26. So if your corrected bicarb comes less than 22, that means another acidosis is present, which is normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. After you have come across, here you got Hagma. Hagma is already there. Only in Hagma you need to calculate corrected bicarb, not in normal or anyone else. In Hagma, high anion metabolic acidosis, you calculate corrected bicarb. Corrected bicarb is what is the difference between expected and actual delta anion gap plus bicarb in the ABG. If this value comes less than 22, that means another acidosis is present. So it will be Hagma, not Hagma, because high anion is already present. Then another will be normal anion gap. If this corrected bicarb level comes between 22 to 26, normal. Means no other metabolic disorder is present, it's normal. Suppose this corrected bicarb comes more than 26, then means metabolic alkalosis is also present. Typical scenario, your diabetic ketoacidosis. Diabetic ketoacidosis, you will have decay due to ketoacidosis and the patient is usually very dehydrated. So you will have high anion gap metabolic acidosis plus metabolic alkalosis. Got? Other clear?
Yes.
Again I am telling you because most of the students get confused in this one. You got a pH less than 7.35 and your bicarbs are low. That means it's a primary metabolic acidosis. Then first step you do, you calculated the expected anion gap. What is the expected anion gap in this? Should be in this patient. Then you have anion gap plus albumin correction plus pH correction. Okay? This is the expected anion gap. Then you calculated the actual anion gap which is there in the ABG. And this you calculate by sodium minus chloride plus bicarb. This is your actual anion gap. Then you compare the two. By comparing, either this can be Hagma, Nagma, normal anion gap, low or negative. Correct? Now if it comes Hagma, then you need to calculate corrected bicarb. How will calculate the corrected bicarb? You will see what was the difference between the two anion gaps, expected and actual. This is called delta anion gap plus the bicarb level in the ABG. If it comes between 22 to 26, it is normal. Less than 22, that means along with Hagma, normal anion gap is also present. If it is more than 26, along with high anion gap, metabolic alkalosis is also present. This is the way you will go. Theek? In normal anion gap, you have, suppose this is the Hagma part, finished up. Compensation you can see in between, to look for whether there is a respiratory component also or no. Range I have told you, compensation for metabolic acidosis 1 to 1.5 is the PCO2 compensation. Now if normal anion gap comes, we have seen high anion gap low. If normal anion gap comes, that means there is nothing extra came in the body, something there in the body which is got imbalanced. Either we are losing bicarb or gaining chloride. So we can gain chloride by saline, if saline resuscitation, lots of fluids we give which has chloride. We can lose bicarb through kidney. We can lose bicarb through kidneys, so that can be the cause. Usually in normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, you calculate urine in anion gap. If urine anion gap is negative, means kidney are not the culprit. If urine anion gap is positive, means definitely some problem with the kidney. Usually GI or kidneys are involved, or iatrogenic, we give extra fluids in this patient. When we will discuss the second section, part of this lecture, what are the causes, then this portion will again become clear. So in normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, you need to look at the urine. If urine anion gap is negative, means kidney is not the culprit. If urine anion gap is positive, means something is wrong with the kidneys. ठीक है? Low anion gap and negative anion gap has limited causes, but you should know, because if you are ABG and you get low anion gap or negative anion gap, you can pick those things very fast. Oh, this patient is having low anion gap, or this patient is having negative anion. I can pick these patients very fast. You don't need so much investigations. Do a anion gap of multiple myeloma. Usually you will get a negative anion gap. है ना? So this is the way metabolic acidosis. It was the toughest part to explain, but I think you are clear now. ठीक है? अब metabolic acidosis is finished, है ना? Now metabolic alkalosis. Metabolic alkalosis means pH is more than 7.45. Metabolic, and bicarb should be
More than 26.
more than 26. Then you have got primary metabolic alkalosis. Primary metabolic alkalosis usually in clinical scenario have two causes. The two pathways are either it can be fluid responsive or fluid unresponsive. Means metabolic alkalosis means, understand this, you have a container, you have salt in it. If you decrease the amount of water, means you have a container with water and you have salt in it. If you decrease the amount of water, free water in that, the salt became concentrated. So those are bicarbs. So bicarb will concentrate it. So it is called contraction alkalosis. Bicarb levels are pseudo high because the amount of fluid in the body is decreased. That is called contraction alkalosis. And this will be chloride responsive. Means if you give fluid to this patient, alkalosis will cover up. And second is chloride unresponsive. Means fluid unresponsive. And most common cause is hypokalemia. So there are many causes, but the two most common causes in the ICU which you encounter is contraction alkalosis and hypokalemia. So if your patient is having metabolic alkalosis, look for the potassium level and look for the hydration status. In one you can give fluids, it will respond. In another you supplement the potassium, not the fluid, that will respond. So this is the cause. Again, when we'll discuss, we'll sit down what are the causes. That will be a better session to understand all those things, but here you need to understand whether my patient is having metabolic alkalosis or not, whether it's fluid responsive or fluid unresponsive. That's it.
Yes.
Now coming to respiratory component, we have covered metabolic component, respiratory component. In metabolic component we have not discussed it's an acute metabolic acidosis or chronic metabolic acidosis, because some problem in the kidney, lungs will adjust very fast. But if there is a problem in the lung, kidneys will not adjust so fast. So in that, the pH don't get correct very fast. Ultimately compensation is working because we need to adjust the pH so that the milieu is maintained in the body. But something goes wrong with the lung, kidney don't adjust. So by that understanding, we can know whether it is an acute respiratory acidosis or chronic respiratory acidosis or acute respiratory alkalosis, chronic respiratory alkalosis. In respiratory acidosis, what will be one thing before this I forgot. What will the compensation in metabolic alkalosis by the lung? In acidosis, there was range of 1 to 1.5. Acidosis a little bit looks like dangerous than metabolic alkalosis, everybody knows. So that lung also understand. So in acidosis, the compensation is for every drop in the bicarb, PCO2 will drop by 1 to 1.5 range. But in alkalosis, the bicarbs are rising. So PCO2 will rise by 0.5 to 1. Correct? And in a way it is a safe measure. If the PCO2 rises too much high, the patient will hypoventilate. PCO2 level will. So when the bicarb level rise, the compensatory respiratory mechanism is 0.5 to 1 increase in the PCO2 for every increase in the bicarb. Correct? Now respiratory acidosis. 7.35 sorry. 7.35 less than pH, less than pH 7, and your PCO2 level should increase or decrease?
Increase.
PCO2 is an acid.
Increase.
So in acidosis, PCO it should increase. So PCO2 level high and your pH is low. Then it is a respiratory acidosis. and pH more than 7.45, PCO2 low, respiratory. Now let's see how the compensation acts. Because in respiratory acidosis nothing is extra there, but in this you need to calculate whether it is an acute respiratory acidosis or chronic respiratory acidosis. So for that, a simple flow chart which is taught to me by my teachers is this one. You will got lots of formula, but this is very easy to remember. This is acute, this is chronic, this is acidosis, and this is alkalosis. Okay, so in acute respiratory acidosis, this is for every 10 change in PCO2. How much bicarb will the kidney adjust? It is not for one PCO2 level. For every 10 change in PCO2, means if from 40 to 30, normal range is 35 to 45 PCO2 levels. If it is less than 35, it's alkalosis. If it is more than 45, then it is acidosis. So for every 10 change in PCO2, how much the bicarb will change? So in acute acidosis, every 10 increase in PCO2, it will increase it. So bicarb will change by 1 only. Acute hai na? It is taking time. It is not giving time. If it is if it is chronic respiratory acidosis, more than 24 hours patient is not ventilating properly, PCO2 is rising, then it is 2. For every 10 increase in PCO2, bicarb will rise by 2. Correct? In alkalosis, hyperventilate करें ना, ऐसे सोचो. Understand? In hypoventilation, respiratory acidosis, hypoventilation is there. Slowly, patient is retaining PCO2. So kidney also feels, so okay, it is slow, I will adjust in that way only. So in acute, 1. If it is chronic, it adjusts 2. Means more than 24 hours, 2. But when you hyperventilate, the kidney also feels something I has to do. So in that way, they will adjust more. In acute respiratory alkalosis, for every 10 change in the PCO2, bicarb will decrease by 3. Because PCO2 is decreasing in alkalosis. And in chronic, 4. This is just to remember 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you go by precisely, it will be 3.5 and it will be 5. Correct? So in respiratory disorders, you need to calculate whether it is an acute disorder or whether it's a chronic disorder. You need to look out for the compensation. We'll do a very short session of 15-20 minutes to look for whether it's an acute respiratory acidosis or chronic respiratory acidosis separately, but I am just giving you a hint here. How will you differentiate this? This you got clear now? How much the bicarb will adjust for every time change in the PCO2. Now suppose, this is the last point before ending. Suppose you have a COPD patient. Suppose you have a COPD patient which is a CO2 retainer, in which who comes to your ICU and PCO2 levels are 80. PCO2 levels are 80. Now, and pH is acidotic. How will you know how much amount of PCO2 is acute and how much amount of PCO2 is chronic one? What is the baseline PCO2? So I am telling you. For every 10 change in PCO2 acutely, means whenever PCO2 changes by 10 acutely within 24 hours, the pH changes by 0.08. Suppose my PCO2 was 40 I started hyperventilating and reached 250. Now the pH will change from 7.4 to 7.32, means 0.08 will drop down. This is clear. For every 10 change in PCO2 level in acute setting, the pH changes by 0.8. So in respiratory acidosis, what is happening? Suppose PCO2 is 8 and pH is 7.24. This is the ABG of a patient who came to you. PCO2 is 80 and pH is 7.24. So it has changed from 7.4 definitely. 7.4 से 7.24 is the change. How much pH change is there? 7.40 minus 7.24, it will be 0.16. Now you will divide this 0.16 by 0.08. So it will come 2. Means 2 times the pH is dropped. Means 0.08, 0.08. So carbon dioxide changes 10 and 10. So 20 PCO2 level in this 80 is acute one. Means 20 if you minus this, and the 60 is the baseline acute chronic level. So this patient will have a baseline PCO2 of 60. You don't have to target to bring it down to 40. So if this patient comes, you will say, I have to put him on BiPAP or ventilate, and needs to bring down PCO2 level to somewhere around 60, not below 60 or 50. It will develop respiratory alkalosis. So don't get panic just by seeing the PCO2 level in any patient. You need to calculate how much is the acute component, how much is the chronic component. So this was the whole class. In this we have seen how to calculate the oxygen status, whether patient is having hypoxemia or mild, moderate, severe hypoxemia. Then we have seen PF ratio. Then we have seen how much should be the PO2 based on your FiO2 levels. Then you have seen alveolar arterial gradient. Then you have seen work of breathing. Then in PCO2 level. In PCO2 level, always look for the pH, whether it's an acute one or chronic one. When you come to pH part, what is the primary disorder, what is the compensation, then metabolic pathway is different, respiratory pathway is different. So this way you will read an ABG. What we have requested from many users on the website, what we will do in coming up session, we will take the live ABGs of patient and we will discuss in 2 to 3 minutes video, so that you can have an idea of practicing ABG, how we are doing in the live scenario. And I think 1 week later or there, we'll take a class where we'll be understanding and listening, interpreting the ABG in context of clinical case scenario. Why this metabolic acidosis is there, why HAGMA is there, whether it's a decay, alcoholic or starvation, why respiratory acidosis is there, whether it is myasthenia, GBS, or all those things. So we'll have a session on this. So today session was absolutely basic on reading an ABG, and coming sessions we'll see how to interpret. We'll have short sessions on practicing ABG live. Okay? I think we can stop here. Okay.